Shalom everyone, and welcome to our study of Parashat Balak. In this Parasha, we are going to read about one of the most famous biblical figures, Balak and Bilam. Balak was the king of Moab at that time, where the Jewish people were journeying in the desert towards the land of Israel. And Bilam was the magician who was hired to curse the Jewish people by Balak. Balak was terrified. He was petrified that the Jewish people, the Am Israel, the nation of Israel, is going to take over his land. And he also realized that the nation of Israel somehow are involved with miracles and that there is a God that protects them. So therefore he decided he will try to use in an unconventional way to try to defeat the nation of Israel. So he hired Bilam the magician to try to curse the Jewish people. He sends messengers to Bilam, asking him to come. At the beginning, God told him, you cannot go with them, and Bilam conveyed the message. Second time around, Balak sends another delegation, promised Bilam plenty of gold and silver and money, and then God says to Bilam, you can go, but you will need to follow my directions. I am going in a way to instill words in your mouth, and you shall speak exactly what I told you. So Bilam got permission from God to go, and he goes. However, we all know the story. On the way, when Bilam is on his way to meet Balak, an angel comes in the middle of the way 3 times and tried to kill Bilam. And the question that we're going to ask is the following. A, why is it that God was so upset with Bilam going to curse the Jewish people after he himself, God himself, gave him permission? And the second question that we would ask and we will try to address will be, why is it that Bilam, whenever we mention his name, and whenever we talk about Bilam, we talk about him with such disgrace and with such a demeaning way? He was a prophet. Not like Moses, but he was a prophet. God talked to him. Why do we view him in such a negative way? So let's start with the question of the Abarbanel, Rabbi Don Abarbanel, in the 15th century. And he says the following. השאלה השמינית, the 8th question. He asks many questions, but the 8th question is, אם הוא יתברך הרשה את בלעם ללכת, if he himself, if God himself, gave permission to Bilam to go and to curse the Jewish people, ואמר לו, and God told Bilam, אם לקרוא לך באו האנשים, קום לך איתם. If they came to ask you to come with them, go with them. איך אחרי שהלך, how come that after Bilam left and went with that delegation, with Balak's delegation, to go and to curse, God forbid, the nation of Israel, נאמר, ויחרף אלוקים כי הולכו, ויתייצב מלאך השם בדרך לשטן לו. והוא לא הלך, אלא ברשותו ובמאמרו. So the Abarbanel is asking a very good question. I'm perplexed, says the Abarbanel. On one hand, God says to Bilam, you can go. On the other hand, he sends an angel to try to stop him and almost to kill him, so he will not go and curse the Jewish people. So make a decision. If you gave him permission, let him go. If you don't want him to go, tell him don't go. So how do we explain such a perplexed condition? So, in Bamidbar, in our Parsha, the Torah says the following. Balak says to Bilam, ואתה, לך נערה לי את העם הזה, כי עצום הוא ממני. Please, Bilam, come here and curse this nation for me, because they are too mighty for me. אולי אוכל נקה בו ואגרשנו מן הארץ. כי ידעתי את אשר תברך מבורך, ואשר תאור יואר. Balak sends a message to Bilam. He says, I would like you to come and to curse the Jewish people, because I know whoever you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is being cursed. And therefore, I'm hiring you to curse the Jewish people. Bilam, after he received the permission, that God gave him permission to go, Take a look at this verse. ויקום בלעם בבוקר. Bilam rose up early in the morning. ויחבוש את אתונו, he himself prepared his own donkey. וילך עם שרי מואב. This verse reminds us another verse from a different book, from Sefer Bereshit, from the book of Genesis. If you remember, in the book of Genesis, we have one of the most famous stories in the Torah, the Parasha of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. When God told Abraham, take your son, your only son, your beloved son, and take him with you, and brought him as an elevation offering, it says the following, ויחבוש אברהם את אתונו, ויקום אברהם בבוקר, וישכם אברהם בבוקר. Abraham rose up early in the morning, and he himself prepared his donkey. Rashi, in the 11th century in France, immediately picked on it, and he says the following, ויחבוש את אתונו, and Bilam prepared his own donkey. Says Rashi, מכאן שהשנאה מקלקלת את השורה, שחבש הוא בעצמו. Bilam was so anxious, so excited. He was thrilled that he can go and curse the Jewish people. He couldn't wait. He woke up early in the morning, didn't wait for his servants to prepare his donkey. He himself prepared his donkey so he can go and quickly meet Balak and curse the Jewish people. That's called dedication, but obviously for a very negative cause. Says Rashi, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rasha. Hashem says to Bilam, you are wicked. You think that your dedication and commitment to your mission will change my mind and I will allow you to curse the Jewish people? No. Avraham kvar kadamach. Their father, this nation of Israel's father, Avraham, our patriarch, he himself already did it. שנאמר, וישכם אברהם בבוקר ויחבוש את חמורו. Avraham already prepared the remedy against what you are about to do. You think that by rising up and waking up early in the morning, you think that you show commitment and love to me? No, no. Avraham already did it. What's the point here? The point here is that we see that even though when we start answering the Abarbanel's question, how come that God was upset with Bilam? Look at Bilam. Bilam is anxious. He is thrilled he can go and curse the Jewish people, thinking that God would allow him to really curse the Jewish people. There is one way that you can go because you got the permission, you're not that excited. But Bilam is excited. He wants to confront Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, and to show that they have no uniqueness. Says God, no, you are wrong, according to Rashi. Avram already established, he already founded one of the greatest merits for the Jewish people, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. And he did it despite the difficulties and the challenges of the binding of Isaac. He rose early in the morning to fulfill my will. So the nation of Israel is already protected. And then Rashi says, Im Sarei Moav, Bilam went with the Moabite delegation, Libo kelibam shaveh. This is a very short Rashi, but with tremendous insight. I can understand, says Rashi, that Balak, the king of Moab, the nation of Moab, and the Moabite nation are terrified. Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, might conquer them and drive them away from their territory. But Bilam had nothing to do with that. Bilam dwelled in a different place. He had nothing to do with the nation of Israel. He had nothing to do with the Moabite nation. But his heart was exactly filled with hate like the Moabites. This is pure anti-Semitism, pure evil. Bilam has nothing to do with the nation of Israel, but when he is called to curse them, to try to look at them in a very negative way, he and the Moabite nation are the same. even though Bilam has nothing to do with the nation of Israel. So if we ask why God is upset with Bilam, Bilam really showed his true colors. Bilam is not interested only in money, silver, gold, and self-glorification and praise. He is interested in the annihilation of the nation of Israel. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in Germany gives a different insight into Bilam's thought process. And he says the following: Vayakom Bilam, and Bilam woke up early in the morning and he prepared his donkey. Says Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, אף על פי כן קם בלעם בבוקר ויחבוש את אתונו וילך בין עומר ודברים עם שרי מואב. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch highlight a very interesting point. If you remember, we mentioned a few minutes earlier that God says to Bilam, I'm giving you permission to go, but you will do exactly what I tell you. You will say word for word for whatever I am going to tell you to say. After that night vision that Bilam had talking to God, in the morning he rose up and he doesn't say anything to this delegation that came to escort him to see Balak, to see the king of Moab. They think that God gave him full permission to do whatever he wants. Bilam, says Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, הוא לא רמז להם דבר על מה שנאמר לו. יתר על כן בשתיקה כהודאה נענה לבקשתם הכפולה והלך עמהם. Which means Bilam hid the fact that God told him, be careful. You can go with them, but you will do what I say, not what they ask you to do. Bilam didn't share that information with them. So basically he misled them. They think that Bilam is coming and they are going to what? To see the victory over the nation of Israel because Bilam is with them. But Bilam did not share with them that he is not an independent person. He is a person that basically owes everything to God and he will do whatever God tells him to do. נראה מהמשך הדברים, says רב שמשון רפאל הירש, שבילם גם אחרי כל מה שאירע לו, קל וחומר עתה בתחילת נסיעתו עדיין היה סבור למרות הכל, שיעלה בידו לבטא את הכללה. Bilam not only didn't share what God told him, he himself was convinced that he will be able to deviate from his commitment to God, which means Bilam thought that his prophecy and that his ability to curse or to bless is only because of himself. In a way, he put God aside and says, okay, God told me that I will do whatever he says. Okay, I heard you. Now I'm going to do whatever I want. This is the arrogancy of Bilam. Bilam is so pompous. Bilam is so arrogant. He thinks he controls everything he does without understanding that it's really God who controls him. עד כדי כך לא היה ליבו חדור הכרת אותה האמת שנאלץ לבטא אחר כך, לא איש אל ויחזב ובן אדם ויתנחם. עד כדי כך טהרת רעיון הקהל תודעת השם שהוא קהל יחיד, ושבענוותנות של גאווה קרא לו השם אלוקיי, הייתה מעורפלת בליבו. Bilam was all confused. On one hand, he is Semite prophet, he communicates with God, but he thinks he can convince God to change his mind. He thinks that they can deviate from God's words. He thinks that he can, in a way, break away from God and do whatever he would wish to do. עד כדי כך גם רעיון זה לבש בליבו צורה אלילית למחצה, שהיה סבור שיוכל לשנות את הדעת העליונה על ידי מעשי נחשים וקסמים ולבטל את רצון השם מפני תאוותיו השפלות. Bilam was an idol worshipper. And this is where our sages were so disappointed from Bilam. Because if we digress for a second, let's just try to understand everything that we read. Bilam is a prophet. He communicates with God. God talks to him. So when we think about prophets, we think about righteous, pious people. People who can walk on their attributes, they purify themselves. They basically become really righteous people. So our expectations from them are very high. And then you have Bilam, who reached that level of prophecy. But at the same time, he thinks that he can manipulate God for his own benefits, which is so much of an idol worshiper perspective. I can dictate to God whatever I want instead of God dictating to me what should I do. That's where Bilam makes a tremendous mistake. Unlike any other prophet who does exactly what God told him to do, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he sees that the nation of Israel, God forbid, are going to be punished, he goes to Hashem and he tries to convince him to change his mind, but he doesn't try to do it on his own. He goes straight to God and he says, God, please don't punish them because the other nations will say bad things about you. It will be the desecration of the name of God, or you promised to the forefathers. But he never tries to manipulate God. Bilam thinks that he can manipulate God. And this is something that obviously is unacceptable. The Abarbanel, who asked the first question that we asked, how come that God is upset with Bilam if he gave him permission to go, says the following: Omnam, Bilam berish'ato lo hegid lemalachei Balak kol divrei Hashem. Bilam, in his evil actions, did not share with Balak's delegation everything that God told him. כי אם היה אומר להם מאמר לא תאור את העם כי ברוך הוא, אולי בלק לא היה פוצר עוד על הליכתו. אבל אמר עליהם בלבד, מעין השם לתיתי להלוך עמכם, ולכן נשאר באפשרות אולי ייתן רשות ללכת עם שרים אחרים. The Abarbanel is highlighting and is emphasizing a different part of Bilam's complicated relationships with God and with Balak's delegation. After the first time, the first delegation that came to Balak, that came to Bilam to ask him to go to Balak, Hashem says to Bilam, the first time, not the second time. The second time he gave him permission to go, but he needs to do exactly what God told him. The first time God told him, you cannot go. Lo telech imahem, you cannot go with them. Lo ta'or et ha'am, you cannot curse this nation. Ki baruch hu, which means this nation is blessed. Therefore, you can't curse them. When Bilam conveyed the message to the first delegation, he just said what? Me'en Hashem letiti la'aloch imachem. Hashem refused to give me permission to go with you. That's it. Which means what? He didn't tell them that God says, my curse will not help because this nation is blessed. He just told them, I can't go with you. Which sounds like what? With you I can't go, but I can go with someone else. Which means, again, what Bilam did not convey was what? The truth. The truth is that the nation of Israel is blessed. And therefore, and why they are blessed? Because it already started with Abraham. When Abraham started his journey, God told Abraham, "Va'avarcha mevarachecha umekalelcha aor v'nivrechu becha kol mishpechot ha'adama." I will bless the people who bless you, and I will curse the people who curse you, and all the nation of the world will be blessed by you. Abraham was blessed, Yitzchak was blessed, Jacob was blessed. Am Israel, the nation of Israel, is blessed, and therefore, you can't curse them. What Bilam failed to do is to convey the uniqueness of the nation of Israel to Balak. Just imagine. If Bilam would tell Balak, look, I can't curse them. They are blessed. Maybe you should find a way to be in peace with them somehow. Maybe the history will be a little different. But Bilam, who was so self-motivated, and what was all about self-glorification and praise, couldn't share that news with the first delegation. And therefore Balak sent another delegation. And when God saw that Bilam really wants to go, he said to himself, I'm going to teach him a lesson. I'm going to tell him you can go with them, but you will do exactly what I ask you to do. You will say exactly what I will imbue in your mouth, knowing that Bilam is going to try to deviate again. So God is going to force Bilam to do exactly what God wants, and Bilam will be embarrassed, as we will see later on. The Abarbanel continues on, and he tries to understand how exactly that curse can really work, and how come that Bilam can say few words and God forbid something will happen to the nation of Israel. So let's see what the Abarbanel has to say about it. אבל היה אמיתת הדבר הזה, שבראשונה היה קוסם וחכם גדול במשפטי הכוכבים, ויודע לעשות כפי השעות על סמאות להוריד השפע מהעליונים לטובה או לרעה על התחתונים. Bilam was a magician, and he was very smart. He knew astrology, and based on different hours, he knew, based on this star or the other star, when is a bad time to pray and when is a good time to pray, and what to say in a very specific time to, God forbid, to bring evil from the upper worlds. וזה מה שאמרו רבותינו ז"ל, שהיה יודע לכוון השעה, שהיה כועס בה הקדוש ברוך הוא, שרצו בזה שהיה יודע לכוון ולבחור השעה שהיה מאדים בבית נשיאותו, ויביטו אליו כוכבים רעים. Meaning, in astrology, there are sometimes times that, for example, one of the stars, let's say Mars or others, have a little bit of a control over that hour. And Bilam knew how to concentrate and to designate his prayer to the attribute of judgment that comes from a specific star, and to try to apply it on the reality in front of him. And therefore, says the Abarbanel, והנה הקדוש ברוך הוא, כשרצה לזכות את ישראל בכיבוש הארץ הקדושה וירושתה, ראה לשפוח רוח נבואתו על בלעם, כדי שינבא הדברים העתידיים להיות מהצלחת ישראל. וכל זה שידעו כל הגויים אויבים את ישראל וישמעו מפיו שבלעם, שבגזרת עירין פתגמה ובמימר קדישין שאילתה, שישראל ירשו הארץ, ושהשם יעץ ומייפר ובזה ירגזו וחלו מפניהם. This is an incredible insight that the Abarbanel shares with us. The Abarbanel asks a hidden question. He says, why do we need the story of Bilam? Why do we need it? To show that he was a false prophet, to show that he was a magician, to show that if God tells you to do something, you need to do. This is all correct. However, the Abarbanel adds a tremendous idea here. The Abarbanel says like that. Says, you know why God chose Bilam? Because he wanted Bilam, who was not Jewish, to prophesy few things. A, Am Israel, the nation of Israel, is going to conquer the land of Israel. When it comes from someone who is not Jewish, but is being held as in a status of a prophet, the other nations will believe him because he has no agenda. So if he says that the nation of Israel are about to conquer the land of Israel, the Canaanite nations, the people who now dwell in the land of Israel, will be terrified. It's coming. Am Israel, the nation of Israel, is coming. They are going back to their home that was promised to their forefathers. So that's goal number one. The second goal is that in Bilam's prophecy, Bilam prophesies for the future. He talks about the fact that the nation of Israel will come back from the exile. He prophesies that Am Israel will have Mashiach, will have the Messiah to lead them to the full redemption. Basically, when it comes from someone who is not Jewish, it's a message for all the other nations. It's reinforcement for us, for sure, for the Jews, for Am Israel, but it's also for the other nations to know what lies in the future for the nation of Israel and for the entire world. And this is why Bilam was chosen. Everyone knew that Bilam is a magician and he knows the future. And therefore, when he says the nation of Israel is going to reach higher levels and they're going to have Messiah and they're going to have the full redemption, everyone will take it to heart. So in a way, the Abarbanel portray Bilam in a very interesting light. On one hand, we don't understand why do we need him. On the other hand, it's essential for us to have a Bilam, not for us, for the other nations. That they would know the uniqueness of Am Israel, of the nation of Israel. And they will know that the future that lies ahead for the nation of Israel will also influence the entire world. Because the nation of Israel is going to not only lead themselves, but lead all of the nations together to a better future. And that's why Bilam was chosen. The Abarbanel continues on and says, והנה מנע השם את בלעם מלקלל את העם ורצה שעל כל פנים יברך אותם. לא מפני שצדקת האבות וזכותם וזכות מעמד הר סיני יוכל בלעם להשחית ושפתי כסיל יבלעם. אלא מפני שהיה עניין בלעם בברכה ובקללה מפורסם מאוד בין האומות כשואל דבר מאת האלוקים. The Abarbanel continues with this idea and he says, you know, why would they believe Bilam? Because Bilam was known to be someone that whoever he's blessed, he's being blessed, and whoever he cursed is being cursed. Which means everyone at that time, in the ancient times, everyone, would you say Bilam, everyone would know who is Bilam. And I guess that Bilam had a track record. He blessed people and they were blessed. He cursed people and they were cursed. So now, if this is my view on Bilam, and I'm a Canaanite, I'm a Moabite, I'm an Ammonite, one of those nations that existed in the ancient times, if I hear that Bilam blessed the Jewish people, oh, I surely believe that the nation of Israel is blessed forever. That creates respect to the nation of Israel, but also fear. Fear that they are blessed and you cannot attack them. וכמו שאמר בלק, כי ידעתי את אשר מבורך ואת אשר טהור יואר. Balak himself, the king of Moab, when he sent the delegation to hire Bilam, he says to him, I know, I'm the king of Moab, and all my nation knows that you are famous in blessing people and cursing people. אמנם, כששמעו מדבריו שהקדוש ברוך הוא מונע מהם הקללה, הוא מודיע כי ברוך הוא יכירו וידעו כל יושבי תבל ושוכני ארץ, כי שם השם נקרא עליהם ויחשבו שהייתה הצלחת ישראל מאת השם מן השמיים. ובזה הועיל עניין בלעם וברכותיו לישראל מאוד. It says Bilam helped tremendously the Jewish people. Because now everyone knows for sure that the nation of Israel is unique and they are about to conquer the land of Israel and they are about to change the world. They are going to create a better future for the entire world. And if you want a proof to it, take a look what the Abarbanel says. ובזה הועיל עניין בלעם וברכותיו לישראל מאוד, וזהו מה שאמרה רחב למרגלים ששלח יהושע. ידעתי כי נתן השם לכם את הארץ וכי נפלה אימתכם עלינו. ומאין ידעה כל זאת האישה ההיא? בשם השם אלוקיכם הוא האלוקים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת, אלא מדברי בלעם ונבואותיו. This is a very unique idea of the Abarbanel. When Joshua sent spies when they are about to enter the land of Israel, Rachav, the woman from Jericho, says to the two spies, I know you're going to conquer the land of Israel. How did she know? How did she know? So she said also that our hearts melted when we heard about the splitting of the sea, Kriyat Yamsuf. Okay, So they heard about that miracle. So they can be fearful of the Jewish people. But how did she know that they are about to conquer the land of Israel? Says the Abarbanel, it's because of Bilam's prophecy. Meaning Bilam's prophecy that the Jewish people are going to conquer the land of Israel. And that Am Israel is going to lead the entire world towards redemption became a known prophecy. So Bilam, who wanted to deviate from God's will, he wanted to do things on his own, basically was a little pawn on the chessboard that God used in order to advance the nation of Israel and to advance the entire world. According to Abarbanel, we fully understand I would call it the complexity and the issue that we have with Bilam. Because on one hand, again, he's a prophet. On the other hand, he's a very vicious, evil person who really had no dog in the fight. He had nothing against the nation of Israel. But because he was filled with hate, filled with self-glorification and self-esteem to the extent that he was pompous, he basically was used as a tool to bless the Jewish people. In in Perek Kaf-Bet, in chapter 22, verse Hey, the Torah states, וישלח מלאכים אל בלעם בן בעור, פטורה, אשר על הנהר, ארץ בני עמו לקרוא לו לאמור, הנה העם יצא ממצרים, הנה כיסה את עין הארץ והוא יושב ממולי. This is the pasuk from our Parasha, that Balak sends messengers, emissaries to Bilam ben Beor, and now pay attention to the word that describes his city's name, Petora. Where is Petora? Asher al nahar. It's a city that sits basically on the river. So Bilam came from where? From Petora, wherever it was, that sits on the river. Okay, take a look at Joshua. In Joshua chapter 24, verse 2, it says, ויאמר יהושע אל כל העם לאמור. ויאמר יהושע אל כל העם, כה אמר השם אלוקי ישראל. Joshua gathered the entire nation of Israel before he died. And he says, this is what God says, בעבר הנהר ישבו אבותיכם מעולם. Your forefathers dwelled where? In עבר הנהר, in the other bank of the river. תרח אבי אברהם, תרח Avram's father, ואבי נחור, ויעבדו אלוהים אחרים, and your forefathers, not Avram, Isaac, and Jacob, but Avram's father, Terach, was an idol worshipper. Avram himself, when he grew up, he was an idol worshipper. Until he what? Until he changed his path and created some kind of a monotheistic movement that believed in one God, that believed in kindness, that believed in judgment, that believed in justice, that believed in charity, that believed in good attributes. And then, ויקח את אביכם, את אברהם מעבר הנהר, והולך אותו בכל ארץ כנען, and I took your father Abraham from that side of the river, and then I led him to where? To the land of Canaan. Now, if you look again in the verse, in the 5th verse, in chapter 22, in Bamidbar, we says, Asher al nahar. And then in Joshua it says, okay, again, be'ever nahar. It seems to be that the Tanakh itself, that the Bible itself, tried to bring Avraham and Bilam to be in the same area geographically, and also perhaps in the same condition and scenarios. And what do I mean by that? Take a look at this midrash, Bereshit Rabbah. It's an ancient midrash around the 6th century in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel. וישכם אברהם בבוקר ויחבוש את חמורו. If you remember with the binding of Isaac, Avraham woke up early in the morning and he prepared his donkey. אמר רבי שמעון ben Yochai, Rashbi, one of the most famous Tanaim in the 2nd century in the land of Israel, אהבה מקלקלת את השורה ושנאה מקלקלת את השורה. When someone loves someone, he can do things that are extraordinary, and also hate can push and stimulate and encourage people to do things that are extraordinary, negatively extraordinary. אהבה מקלקלת את השורה, תכתיב וישכם אברהם בבוקר ויחבוש את חמורו, ולא היה לו כמה עבדים. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says when Avraham woke up in the morning, early in the morning to take Isaac with him, he prepared his own donkey. What, Avraham does not have servants to do it for him? אלא אהבה מקלקלת את השורה. Because Avraham loved God so much, and he wanted to fulfill God's mission and God's will, he woke up early in the morning, did everything by himself, and took Isaac with him. ושנאה מקלקלת את השורה. And hate also stimulate, encourage a person who is filled with hate to also to do extraordinary things. How do we know that? Same thing from Bilam. ויקום בילם בבוקר ויחבוש את אתונו. Bilam woke up early in the morning and he himself prepared his donkey. What, he couldn't ask his servants to do it? He could. He didn't want to, because he felt that it will delay his arrival to Balak. And then, until now we remember it from Rashi, but now Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai adds one more. And he says, אהבה מקלקלת את השורה שנאמר, ויאסור יוסף מרכבתו ויעל לקראת ישראל אביו. When Jacob comes down to Egypt, when Joseph heard that his father is coming, he himself prepared his wagon, his chariot, and he goes in the chariot and he drives to see his father Jacob. He's so excited, he's so thrilled to see his father after 20 plus years. He's doing that by himself, he can't wait. That's again, when you are motivated with love, with longings, so you do it by yourself. ושנאה מקלקלת את השורה, שנאמר, דכתיב ויאסור את רכבו, ולא היו לו כמה עבדים, אלא שנאה מקלקלת את השורה. When Pharaoh realized that the Jewish people left Egypt, that's at the end of Parashat Bo, and then in Parashat Beshalach, he gets the troops by himself. He does not use any servants, any slaves. He is doing that by himself. Why? Because he's filled with hate and anger and wrath, and he wants to what? To chase the Jewish people. So what do we see from here? We see that Bilam and Pharaoh are on one hand, they are people filled with hate, with thinking that they can deviate from what God's want. They think that they can do whatever they want and hurt the Jewish people. On the other hand, you have Abraham, who was filled with love and commitment to God, and Joseph, who had love and longings to his father, and they both do extraordinary things. So you can see how excitement, commitment can lead to love and doing God's will, or deviation, trying to mislead people, to do things that are evil and vicious. אמר רבי שמעון בן יוחאי, תבוא חבשה ותעמוד על חבשה. תבוא חבשה שחבש אברהם אבינו ללך ולעשות רצונו של מקום, של מי שאמר והיה העולם, ותעמוד על חבשה שחבש בלעם ללך ולקלל את ישראל. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, when you look at Avram, it says, ויחבוש. He himself prepared his donkey for the journey. And with Bilam, it says the same thing. Abraham's, in his actions, in his love to God, basically created enough merit to protect the nation of Israel from Bilam's action. Here you have the split. God talks to Abraham. God talks to Bilam. Avram is doing an extraordinary thing. Bilam is doing an extraordinary thing. But the split, the gap is tremendous. Avram creates merit, good deeds. Bilam creates destruction and deviation. At the end, God changed it to something that is beneficial for Am Yisrael. But Bilam himself is the terrible example for someone who can reach a very high spiritual level, communicating with God directly, and still try to control himself and his deeds, ignoring and being oblivious to God's will. Take a look how the Midrash, in a very cynical way, describes Bilam. ואתה אמרה בעיניך שובה לי. When Bilam talks to the angel who tried to stop him, so Bilam says in such a pious way, look, if it's too bad in your eyes, I'll go back. Take a look at the Midrash. אמר לו, אני לא הלכתי עד שאמר לי הקדוש ברוך הוא קום לך איתם, ואתה אומר שאחזור? Bilam says to the angel, I don't understand. God told me to go, now you are just the angel. You tell me to go back? כך אומנותו. לא כך אמר לאברהם, הקריב את בנו, ואחר כך ויקרא מלאך השם, ויאמר, אל תשלח ידך. למוד הוא לומר דבר, ומלאך מחזירו. ועכשיו הוא אומר לי, לך איתם, ועכשיו אמרה בעיניך, שובה לי. Bilam is saying something which is really a disgrace. Basically says, you know what? He talks to the angel, says, God told me that I can go, but now he sends an emissary to tell me not to go. God is known to do those things. God told Abraham to sacrifice Yitzchak, and then, when he was about to sacrifice Yitzchak, an angel came to him and says, don't touch him. Take the ram instead of him. Which means, says Bilam, God does not make any decisions. He says one thing, then he changes his mind, or he sends an emissary to nullify his word. So you know what? I'm not working with a God like that. I'm going to do whatever you want. If you don't like me to go, I will not go. Look on Bilam's perspective. He does not see that the angel is God's emissary. He thinks that there are different entities here and he can play with God the way he wants. That's called idol worshipping. Thinking that you can dictate to God what you want to do. Judaism is exactly the opposite. We hear God's commandments and then we try to follow. But we don't try to dictate to God what to do. Bilam is a terrible example of a person who reached very high spiritual levels, but it never changed him as a person. And the Mishnah in Avot specifying it. כל מי שיש בידו שלושה דברים הללו, anyone who has three things in his hands, מתלמידיו של אברהם אבינו. So he can be considered as a student of Abraham. ושלושה דברים אחרים מתלמידיו של בלעם הרשע. And if you have other three things, you can be considered as a student of Bilam, the evil Bilam. What are the three things? עין טובה, רוח נמוכה ונפש שפלה, מתלמידיו של אברהם אבינו. If you have a good eye, you look at things positively, not being naive, but looking at situations with a good eye, with a good perspective. רוח נמוכה, you are humble. נפש שפלה, you know who you are, but you understand that you are God's servant. מתלמידיו של אברהם אבינו. You are considered a student of Avraham Avinu. עין רעה, if you have a bad eye, a negative eye, you look at things only on deficiencies, you only look at things that you can hurt and damage. ורוח גבוהה, you are pompous, you are arrogant. ונפש רחבה, and you always want what? You want more. מתלמידיו של בלעם הרשע. You are considered as Bilam's student, the evil Bilam. מה בין תלמידיו של אברהם אבינו לתלמידיו של בלעם הרשע? What's the major difference between Abraham's students and Bilam's students, besides those three things? תלמידיו של אברהם אבינו אוכלים בעולם הזה ונוחלים בעולם הבא. Abraham's students enjoy this world, and also they have the world to come. But Bilam's students, they might enjoy this world, but in the next world to come, they're not going to have a fun time in the next world. So what's the point of this Mishnah, of this Tanaic source, the Mishnah in Avot? What characterized Bilam is Ain Ra'ah, always trying to look at deficiencies. Ruach Gvoa, becoming arrogant, does not see himself that he needs to submit himself to God. V'nefesh Rechava, always wants more. It's never enough. Whenever you have plenty, you want more. This is Bilam. So now, let's go back. Our first question was, how come that God told him you can go, and then he was upset with him? The answer is, God told him you can go and do what I say. Bilam did not convey that message. Bilam just heard the first sentence, you can go. And then he was totally oblivious, or he tried to ignore God's second sentence, you will do whatever I say. B, he was thrilled to go. He wanted to go, he was excited to go, he was anxious to go to curse a nation that he had nothing to do with them. A, B, he heard from God that this is a blessed nation. You think you can go against God? So we answer the first question. The second question that we ask is, why is it that our sages looked at Bilam in such a negative way? And I think that the answer is the following. Our sages could not bear the idea that you can have someone who can raise himself to a prophetic status. He's a prophet, he talks to God. And it does not change his attributes. It does not change the way he behaves even for one iota. Our sages always advocates, if you reach a higher level spiritually, your attributes, your behavior, you need to be a mensch. You can't have an evil eye, being arrogant and pompous and always wants more. Meaning, as you go up, as you raise yourself up, as you elevate yourself up spiritually, talking to God, communicating with God, our expectations of you as a person is much higher. There is an unfulfilled potential with Bilam. He had all the tools in his hands to become a pious, righteous prophet and help the other nations to better themselves and maybe to join Am Yisrael and bring Geulah, bring redemption. Instead, he took himself down and everyone else down. When you have a potential and you don't use it, when you have an unfulfilled potential, and then you use your powers to do bad and negative things, our sages had no any other choice but to portray him as Bilam Harasha, as the evil, wicked Bilam. But if you want to be Abraham's student, if you want to be considered as Abraham's people, we have a roadmap, Ain Tova, to look at things with a positive perspective. Again, not being naive, but to look at things, how can we correct things? Ruach Nemucha, being humble. V'nefesh shvela, to be satisfied with what you have, not being motivated or ambitious, but to know why we do what we do. Then we will enjoy this world and the world to come. Thank you.